In this episode of FullDroopTV, we installed new leaf springs and fabricate a bed cage for bypass shocks to finish off the rear suspension for Project Silverado. FullDroopTV starts now. This episode of FullDroopTV is brought to you in part by Swayaway.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of FullDroopTV. In our last episode, we installed our LSK long travel kit, and now it's time to get the rear suspension to match the front. We're going to do that by installing a set of Deaver long travel leaf springs. Their 10 leaf spring design allows the use of thinner material that yields a more progressive leaf stack for a much smoother spring rate, giving us better ride quality no matter what the terrain. And this is how you install them.
Before we get started installing our Deaver long travel leaf springs, we wanted to show you how much droop travel we have between the factory bump stop pad and the bump stop itself. It looks about 7 inches. First thing we need to do is remove the factory shocks. Remove the U-bolts holding the leaf spring to the axle. It's always a good idea to order new U-bolts when you order your Deaver springs. As you can see, these are a little bit longer, and that makes up for the extra thickness in the leaf pack. To remove the front leaf spring bolt, we're using a 24mm deep socket between the frame rail and the exhaust. You have to slip the socket into a pocket in the frame, pass through the frame to get to the head of the bolt. There's no way for us to back out this leaf spring bolt because of the frame rail here. So we're going to remove the lower shackle bolt first and take out the entire leaf spring. With all the bolts out, now we can remove the factory leaf spring. There's a noticeable difference between the factory leaf springs and our Deaver long travel leaf pack. We drilled out the factory leaf perch to fit over the locator nut on the leaf springs. Let's get them on the truck. Make sure you grease up your bushings before you install them in the leaf springs to avoid any squeaks later on. We have the Deaver leaf pack in position. We've reinstalled the factory shackle, and now we're putting in the lower bolt. With our 37-inch Mickey Thompson tires installed, you can see we don't have enough clearance. So I'm going to use a body saw and cut right along this line that I made to open up the wheel wells. Fiberworks originally designed these bed sides to reuse the factory rear bumper. In an upcoming episode, we're going to be building a Prerunner bumper. So for now, we're going to cut along this line so that the body better matches our bumper.
When we originally installed our fiberglass bedsides, we hadn't installed our Deaver leaf springs to know how much we needed to clearance the wheel wells to fit our 37-inch Mickey Thompson tires. After removing our temporary bedside supports, we used 1-inch 095 tubing and welded them directly to the frame. Before welding to the frame, we needed to clear off the factory frame coating to give us a clean area to weld the new supports.
In order to make our bed cage removable, we wanted to make it a bolt-in installation. So we fabricated these mounts. Basically, it's a piece of tubing with flat plate, and then we cap the end of the tube. Before we cap the end of the tube, we welded a nut to the bottom side with a hole drilled in it. That way we can actually use the top portion of our bed cage to mount directly to this point, which will weld into the frame and pass through the bed.
After marking where our holes need to be cut on the underside of the bed for our first bed cage mount, we drilled a small hole through the center. Then we transferred the marks to the top side of the bed so we could cut it out with the plasma cutter. After using the plasma cutter, we used a die grinder to smooth out the edges of the holes.
Earlier we told you we're doing a bolt-in installation for the Silverado bed cage. This is how we're going to do it. We're taking a tube cap and a nut. We're going to weld the nut directly to that tube cap and then place it on the top of our vertical tube. After we weld it in here, this piece gets welded into the frame and we have a bolt location for the bed cage. Make sure you grind off all the factory frame coating. That way you get a nice clean weld with no impurities.
When we placed our mounts on the frame, we made sure it was flush with the top side of the bed floor before burning it in.
We're using a plasma cutter to cut holes in our bed for our sway-away bypass shocks to pass through. Your bed cage design and your lower shock mounts will determine where the holes need to be in your bed. This is the upper portion to the lower frame mounts we showed you earlier. After I get these 4 bolted in, it's time to bend up some tube for the bed cage. We're using our JD squared tube bender to bend up all the 2-inch 120 wall tubing for our bed cage.
After we marked the tube where it needed to be notched, we used the plasma cutter to cut it out. Then we used a grinder to clean up the edges. After both ends were notched on our first bent tube, we welded to the frame mounts closest to the cab. We measured the length of the tube we needed to go from the center bend to the rear frame mounts, then cut the tube to length.
We went ahead and made some paper templates for our lower shock mount. Basically what we're going to do is trace this out on some steel, cut it out, drill it, then we're going to put the slight bend in each tab. That'll offset the shock mounting location away from the frame, giving us more clearance.
A step bit or unibit is the perfect tool for drilling holes in tabs.
We're using the misalignment spacers that came with our sway-away bypass shocks to keep the spacing correct between our mounting tabs. We're going to get them welded up and then we'll box them in. We're using our cardboard template as a guide to lay out our design on the steel. Once we cut it out with a plasma cutter, we'll clean it up with a grinder and get it all fabricated. Now that we have our inner structure tacked in place, we're going to fully weld every seam inside. Then we're going to take the outer boxing plate, bring it up, weld it as well. Then before we reinstall it in the truck, we're going to box the entire outside structure. So we've got our bed cage all tacked up. We're going to remove it, put it on the welding table, finish all the welds, reinstall it back in the truck, and put in the shocks. Well, now that we have the bed cage out of the truck, we decided to make some corner gussets. We made cardboard templates, fit them in place so we can double up all these joints. We laid those out on some steel, cut those out, they're ready to go. All we have to do now is weld them up.
For our rear shocks, we're going to be using these 16-inch 3-tube bypass shocks from Swayaway. Now, what makes bypass shocks such a perfect choice is their tunability. These are the bypass tubes. When your shock is working, there's a piston inside this main shock body that pushes up and also falls back, and it's pushing oil through these external tubes. Now, when that oil hits these valves, it passes back into the main body, and by adjusting these valves, that's what gives you control over compression and rebound, giving you more control over your rear suspension. Now that our bed cage is back in the truck, it's time to install our shocks.
Be sure to use grade 8 fasteners with anything you do off-road. Since we created new shock mounts for our rear suspension, we're going to cut the old ones off. It'll improve ground clearance. Just remember, when you do cut these off, don't cut too close to the axle tube or else you'll weaken the structure. The last part of our rear suspension are these limit straps we picked up from Butch's Speed Shop. Be sure to remove your limit straps before final welding, that way you don't burn the actual strap. With our Silverado frame up on jack stands, we've let the rear suspension droop out completely. Now the reason we did that is we needed to get a point-to-point measurement for our limit straps. Now limit straps are extremely important. Whenever your rear suspension droops out, you don't want to let the shock fully extend because it'll actually damage the shock itself. So we run these limit straps. Now we measured for ours, they ended up being 24 inches. Now keep in mind, you want to allow for 1 inch of stretch per foot on your limit straps after use. So we went with 24 inches, limited it a little bit, knowing that we're going to have that extra amount of stretch.
FDTV Talk is presented by Prerunner Maniac.
If I build a Prerunner, should it be a two-wheel drive or a four-wheel drive?
That's a great question, Julian. People that are new to Prerunners don't realize that a lot of them are two-wheel drive. But you can build a four-wheel drive model like our upcoming F-150 project. It's only a matter of how you want to use your Prerunner. If you just want to go fast through the desert, then a two-wheel drive Prerunner is a great choice. They're lighter, you only have one axle to re-gear once you get bigger tires on them, and you also can get a lot more travel out of them because you're not limited by the CV joints that are required on a four-wheel drive model. With a four-wheel drive Prerunner, you get peace of mind, knowing that if you get caught in some deep silt, you're not going to have to grab a shovel. Four-wheel drive Prerunners also help you if you're blasting down a graded road. Stick it in 4 high and you'll notice your steering will tighten up and not wander as much as it would in two-wheel drive. And remember, if you have a question that you want answered, visit FullDroopTV.com and click on the FDTV Talk icon. Our rear suspension is complete now and can finally keep up with the front suspension, thanks to our sway-away bypass shocks, our Deaver leaf springs, and this crazy bed cage we fabricated. In our next episode, we're going to be adding some protection to our Silverado in the form of a rear bumper with an integrated tire carrier. And if you have any questions about the products we use in this episode, visit FullDroopTV.com.
Use a body saw and chop.
Now that the bed cage is back in the, if you get caught on your lines.
Fiberworks originally designed these bumpers. That's wrong. That'll give us extra clearance.